Guten Morgen, guten Morgen, guten Morgen, Sonnenschein. Diese Nacht blieb dir verborgen.
We are the JMS Global Arts and Humanities Class of 2019, 24 8th graders who are given the amazing opportunity to visit 5 countries within a span of 10 days. This year we traveled to Prague, Czech Republic, Krakow, Poland, Budapest, Hungary, Bratislava, Slovakia, and Vienna, Austria.
How was the weather during the trip?
Surprisingly really nice. This time of year, and we were told this by everybody that we encountered, this time of year was supposed to be miserable. It was supposed to be snowy and rainy and gross.
The weather was pretty consistent and decent the entire time. It was all like 50 degrees or so.
It was nicer than I thought it was going to be, and it wasn't really that cold.
It was warmer than I expected, but there were some days that were pretty cold.
It was honestly really nice until Vienna, and it was like cold and rainy, and that was really miserable, and I was not expecting that at all.
The weather actually wasn't too bad. It was a little chilly.
It was cold, but not as cold as I expected.
The 5 countries we visited make up a large portion of the area known as Central Europe. Central Europe is in the middle of the European continent, east of Russia, south of Sweden, and northeast of Italy. While these countries are smaller than the US, their populations are much more dense. Central Europe is a geographically diverse area with varying land types and many prominent features. The most notable geographical features in the area that we visited are the Vltava River, also known as Moldau in German, the Danube River, and the Tatra Mountains, which are connected to the Carpathian and the Alps.
People first settled in Central Europe for this arable land, which became the foundation for an agriculture-based society. Settlements began to form due to the abundance of farmland and the protection provided by the surrounding mountains. The nearby rivers served as information highways, quickly transporting goods and ideas across the region. The earliest evidence of human activity in the area was found in caves and burial sites around modern-day Germany, the Czech Republic, and Poland. This evidence included small statuettes, pottery, tools, and jewelry. The 2 pieces, known as the Venus of Hohlfels and the Lion Man, are over 40,000 years old. The Bronze Age was a very crucial era in the history of Central Europe. During this time, metallurgy, the science of production and purification of metal, helped increase the area's population and wealth. Metal ores such as copper and tin used to forge bronze were found abundantly in this area. Trade also improved as the Danube River became an important axis for the exchange of goods and ideas. During this time, there was a noticeable shift in how civilization was organized. This new social stratification was based solely on wealth and power. The Roman Empire, in its continuous attempt to gain more territory and power, spread throughout Europe until the tribes of the North Danube stalled their efforts. This resistance by the predominantly Germanic tribes ultimately resulted in the Danube River becoming the northernmost border of the Roman Empire. The Romans, eager to protect their land they had gained, built a line of military encampments along the river. Vindobona, one such camp, grew into a large city within the city limits of what is now Vienna, Austria. The camp had an asymmetrical layout which is still visible in Vienna's street plans today. Aquincum, another prominent Roman encampment, is located in modern-day Budapest. Many of the ruins are visible today, including 2 large amphitheaters, a military fortress, and the foundation wall of a civilized town.
Western Rome's collapse and the incoming Hun invasion cued the beginning of a 2-phase migration period. The Germanic tribes primarily settled in modern-day Austria and Germany, as well as the outermost edges of the modern-day Czech Republic. The Czechs occupied the northern and central parts of the current-day Czech Republic at the time called Bohemia. The Hungarians took over a large swath of Central Europe, including a portion of what is now western Slovakia, northern Austria, and a sliver of northeastern Hungary. Slovaks populated the eastern Czech Republic and the very southern tip of modern-day Poland. The Poles lastly settled in the eastern Czech Republic and some of what is now southern Poland.
What was your favorite city and why? Definitely Budapest, because of all like the hills on Buda, and it was just really pretty.
I liked Prague the best because of all the differing styles of architecture that you could see.
I would have to say Budapest, just because I didn't understand that there was 2 different sides and how different they were.
My favorite city was Prague because it was pretty.
My favorite city was Budapest because I thought it was the prettiest.
I would say either Prague or Vienna.
After the big migrations, the city of Prague, Krakow, Budapest, Bratislava, and Vienna were founded between 125 and 1873 CE. The foundation of our 5 cities begins in Bratislava, Slovakia, sandwiched between the Danube River and the Carpathian Mountains. The first known residence was a fortified Celtic town built on what is now Castle Hill in 125 BCE. West Slavic tribes were able to maintain control of the area for hundreds of years until the Magyars defeated the Bavarians and Bratislava was incorporated into Hungary. In 1271, the Peace of Pressburg is signed, granting Bohemian parts of present-day Austria and Slovakia and officially establishing Pressburg as a town. Later, Pressburg is annexed to the Austrian Habsburgs, who maintained control of the area until the end of World War I. During that time, Bratislava served for many purposes, including becoming the Hungarian royal capital, housing the Habsburgs' crown jewels, and hosting numerous coronations, as well as serving as a home for several famous Habsburgs. Prague was first established as a town in 880 CE by Prince Vojvoj when he constructed the Prague Castle. It gained influence over the region in 973 CE when their bishopric was founded. The city crowned its first king in 1085, and Prague became the city we know today, when Old Town and Lesser Town were bridged by the Judith Bridge in 1170. Prague was officially declared a town by Wenceslaus I in the year 1240. Then in the 14th century, the city was elevated to the status of archbishopric and became a pilgrimage destination with the acquisition of a holy relic. The original Judith Bridge collapsed due to flooding in 1342 and was rebuilt into the bridge still standing today, known as the Charles Bridge. The Charles Bridge links Old Town and Lesser Town in Prague. 30 Baroque statues of various important saints and patrons line the sides of the bridge located over the Vltava River. The bridge is now pedestrian only, and many street vendors line the sides to sell to the passing citizens. Soon after Prince Vojvoj recognized Prague, the name Vienna was first recorded in 881 CE. While people have occupied the area known as Vienna since Paleolithic times, the first official settlement was the Roman military fortress called Vindobona. Vienna developed into an important trading center due to its location along the Danube River. Because of its advantages and easily defensible location, Vienna was claimed by Duke Henry of Austria in 1156. Soon after, in the 13th century, city walls were constructed as protection against potential invaders. Later on, Rudolf I took control of Austria from the Bohemian Empire and established Habsburg rule there for 600 years. The first known permanent settlement in modern-day Budapest was Okwidkum, an old fortified Roman settlement. Later on, in 896 CE, Arpad, head of the Hungarian tribes, led the Magyars into the area and established the Hungarian state. Originally, Budapest was two different cities by the name of Buda and Pest. In 1241, the Hungarian state was greatly devastated by the Mongols. Immediately afterward, the King of Hungary began fortifying and constructing his palace in Buda. Then the Hungarian court was moved to Buda, and due to that, Pest began to grow. It wasn't until 1873 that Buda and Pest unified to become Budapest. The first known settlement in Krakow was established in the 4th century on Wawel Hill. On the hill lives the statue of a dragon named Smock Wawelski. The legend of the statue starts long ago. Smock terrorized Krakow. However, he would ignore the people if they sacrificed a lamb and a young girl. Over time, Krakow was incorporated into many different groups. The city served as an early capital for the Wisłams, before being briefly incorporated into the Great Moravian and finally into Bohemian after Great Moravian's destruction. Then Mieszko I took the Polish land from Bohemia and established a Polish state. Krakow became a leading trade hub by the end of the 10th century. It then became the seat of the Polish government in 1038 and was officially recognized as a town in the same year.
How difficult was the language barrier to overcome?
Wasn't very difficult at all. Too many people spoke English.
Everybody pretty much knows English.
It was like moderately easy. Everyone pretty much spoke English, so that was pretty easy.
Because of the diverse cultures that make up Central Europe, almost all of the countries speak their own language. Austria, a German-speaking country, is the only Central European nation that shares a language with another country. The Czech Republic's main language is Czech. In Poland, the majority of the population speaks Polish. Hungarian is widely spoken in Hungary, and finally in Slovakia, roughly 81% of the people speak Slovak. While most languages in Central Europe fall into the categories of Germanic or Slavic, Hungarian is quite unique. It is a Finno-Ugric language, and there are only two other languages that fit in the same category. The Slavic languages of Central Europe include Czech, Polish, and Slovak. The written Slavic languages were brought to Central Europe by two brothers known as Cyril and Methodius. Cyril was the creator of the first Slavic alphabet, and Methodius was a Catholic monk. It was originally prohibited to preach in any other language than Latin. Methodius, however, preached in Slavic languages.
When the tribes from the east first settled in the region, they practiced their own beliefs until Catholicism was introduced between 600 to 800 CE. From then on, Catholicism was a prominent religion in Central Europe. The Catholic Church determined almost everything, including fashion trends, music, art, and local laws. Catholicism was brought to Moravia, later Central Europe, by Cyril Methodius. Methodius continued his work, helping to expand Christianity by the Slavic language until his death in 882. When the territory of Moravia became Central Europe, the countries adopted Catholicism. In 1054, an event called the Great Schism occurred. The Great Schism was a split between the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. Centuries later, the Protestant Reformation took place. This led to various Catholic Church ultimately splitting into Catholics and various Protestant churches. Today, the most widely practiced religion in most of the countries in Central Europe is Roman Catholicism. As Catholicism was emerging into Central Europe's culture, there is a strong need for religious structures.
Many early churches in Central Europe were built in the Romanesque style. Romanesque combines Byzantine and Roman architectural influences. It is characterized by very little decoration, rounded arches, and small windows. The use of barrel vaults allowed for huge interior spaces built entirely out of stone. The roofs of these structures were very heavy, meaning the walls had to be thick. Strong walls allowed only small windows, which made the structures very dark inside. St. Andrew's Church in Krakow is a good example of Romanesque style. With the advancement of construction techniques and a desire to be closer to God, the Gothic style was developed. Gothic architecture was born in the 12th century and was very different compared to the previous Romanesque style. Gothic structures were made with the idea of glorifying God and heaven, soaring, colorful, and bright with pointed arches and massive windows. During this period, buildings got taller and were built with thinner walls. Stained glass windows were also introduced. Many of the buildings have huge ornate windows called rose windows. Buildings got more complex as well, and more rooms were added to the traditional cross design. Many churches and cathedrals in Europe are in this style, including the St. Vitus Cathedral in Prague and St. Mary's Basilica in Krakow. Located in Prague, the old royal palace was built in the Gothic style, but also with elements of Renaissance. Renaissance architecture, which developed in the 1500s and 1600s, was influenced by the classical Greek and Roman periods. Buildings are very symmetrical and even, often constructed using marble. Baroque is very similar to Renaissance architecture in that it is over-the-top, dramatic, decorative, and highly ornate. The late period of Baroque architecture is known as Rococo, which occurred in the late 17th and early 18th century. It originated in France before spreading throughout Europe and was mostly associated with royalty. Baroque is the most prominent architectural style in Vienna due to the preferences of one of their most infamous rulers, Empress Maria Theresa. The Neo-Gothic period is similar to the Gothic, but the main difference is less decoration. For example, the Matthias Church in Budapest is very Gothic-looking, but more streamlined and less decorative.
What was your favorite building?
The St. Mary's Basilica in Krakow.
St. Stephen's.
My favorite building was probably St. Matthias Church.
Probably St. Vitus Cathedral.
My favorite building was St. Vitus Cathedral because of the Gothic architecture.
The Habsburg dynasty was a big influence on Central European architecture. The Habsburgs were a large and powerful royal family in Europe. Their first territory to rule over was the land that is now known as Switzerland. After a Swiss rebellion, the Habsburgs retreated to their territory in Vienna. The family made various agreements and arranged marriages to accumulate more territory. Maximilian I is considered to be the father of the Habsburg dynasty for uniting the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman. Rule over this empire began to be maintained exclusively by the Habsburgs in the 1400s. Examples of Habsburg-related buildings include the Bratislava Castle, the Belvedere Palace, and the Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna. Eventually, the Holy Roman Empire fell, but the Habsburgs created the Austro-Hungarian Empire out of their eastern territory. This is the same empire that started World War I. The Habsburgs also had a large influence on art, music, and architecture.
During their reign, the Habsburgs commissioned a majority of the art being created in Central Europe. This action caused many uprisings because the people believed the art didn't express their reality. Each protest transitioned into a new art movement. Throughout Central Europe's history, art has played a major role in their culture and society. The people used art to express themselves in a variety of ways. Between 1890 and 1910, the Art Nouveau style was widely used. It was seen most often in the decorative arts. This period emphasized curvier lines and natural figures. Some well-known artists from this time are Mucha, Gustav Klimt, and Egon Schiele. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart is a great influence in classical music. From a very young age, he was composing and performing music, and was performing for royalty not long after. When we visited his apartment in Vienna, we saw his original compositions as well as clothing, relics, and paintings. We also visited his grave while still in the city. We listened to his music when we went to a concert in Vienna.
What was your favorite piece of art that you saw?
My favorite piece of art was Lady and the Ermine.
I would say just the architecture of all of the buildings that we went into and we saw was the art that I enjoyed the most.
I think it was in Vienna. There's this big painting of an ostrich and it was really cool.
Okay, well, I liked a lot of art, but I guess my favorite was like this weird ostrich painting.
The ostrich, definitely.
What was your favorite piece of art that you saw?
There were many events across Europe that led to the Great War, one of these being an increase in nationalistic ideals in the countries involved, along with imperialism expressed between the countries. This also played a role in the buildup of militarism when Germany's military made the transition from army to empire in a relatively short period of time. On June 28th of 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife were assassinated in Sarajevo, which is the tipping point for Austria-Hungary that led to the war. The Austro-Hungarian Empire did not take the assassination well, believing Serbia was the cause, so naturally they sided with Germany and delivered an ultimatum to Serbia. Proceeding to cut their diplomatic ties, they began to mobilize their army. July 31st, the Allies and Central Powers had developed and war was declared. The Allies consisted of Serbia, Russia, France, Britain, and eventually the US, while the Central Powers were comprised of Austria-Hungary, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire. The war was a total of 4 years long. In 1914, the first year of the war, the Schlieffen Plan was invented by the Germans in the West. They were going to encircle France to defeat them, but their plan failed. The Eastern Front, however, was held with some success. In 1915, the Germans began being more aggressive rather than defensive with the invention of poisonous gas. The Russians had to back out of the war due to a revolution in their country, which made the situation for the Allies seem hopeless. That was until the U.S. came into the picture. In 1918, there was more pressure on the troops on the Western Front by the Central Powers, but the U.S. was pouring in troops, causing the war to end that year. In 1919, the armistice was signed by Germany to promote peace in Central Europe. After 5 months of negotiations, the conditions were decided on what was to happen to Germany. It was known as the Treaty of Versailles. Because of the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was at a disadvantage economically and socially.
In the aftermath of the U.S. stock market crash of 1929, the United States began demanding payment for their loans from World War I, leading to the plummet of the global economy. Germany, after being blamed for the entirety of World War I, was looking for a leader to help fix their desperate financial situation. Adolf Hitler had such a strong appeal because he offered solutions to their economic problems. In January of 1933, Hitler began his rise to power when he was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Hitler then, to solidify his power, combined the forces of Chancellor and President and named himself the Führer. On March 15, 1939, Germany invaded Czechoslovakia. Major powers ignored the invasions in an attempt to avoid conflict with Germany. World War II officially started on September 1, 1939, when German troops invaded Poland for both their farmland to feed their armies and to eliminate the large Jewish population. The war quickly escalated to involve countries from all over the world.
How did you feel going into Auschwitz?
It was life-changing to be in the same place where millions of people had died.
When I went into Auschwitz, I didn't really know what to expect.
Intrigued.
I was a little stressed out because it's a really intense environment and just kind of scary to be around.
I didn't feel a whole lot different at first. It just wasn't, it wasn't until later that I started thinking more and more about it.
It felt like hard walking in there and knowing that it was real.
During the events of World War II, the Holocaust was happening behind the scenes. The Holocaust was a system of Nazi work and extermination camps set up throughout Europe. In these camps, those who weren't killed immediately upon arrival were subjected to inhumane treatment until death or the end of World War II, and therefore the Holocaust in 1945. Hitler's goal was to eliminate everyone he considered an imperfect human. The death toll of the Holocaust was 6 million Jews, 3 million Soviet prisoners of war, 1.3 million non-Jewish Polish citizens, 250,000 disabled people, 196,000 to 220,000 gypsies, 70,000 asocials, and an unknown amount of homosexuals. Auschwitz I and Auschwitz II, also known as Birkenau, were two of the main concentration camps used by the Nazis. The camps are now museums meant to preserve the physical evidence of the Nazis' crimes and to honor the lives lost. On display you can find suitcases, clothes, shoes, utensils, and 2 tons of shaved hair collected from prisoners. Multiple housing units, labs for inhumane experimentation, furnaces, gas chambers, and the barbed wire surrounding the camp can all be seen. Less of Birkenau remains due to the destruction of many buildings on the site. In the camp, there will be anywhere from 4 to 7 prisoners in a bunk. At the back of Birkenau is a memorial comprised of 22 stones with the same message, each stone written in a different language. The message reads, "Forever let this place be a cry of despair and a warning to humanity," where the Nazis murdered about 1.5 million men, women, and children, mainly Jews, from the various countries in Europe. Auschwitz-Birkenau, 1940 to 1945. Oskar Schindler's factory was a refuge for Jewish workers. Schindler employed many Jewish civilians to help them escape Nazi persecution. The factory is located in Krakow, Poland, and the photos of those saved can be found on the window panes on the side of the building. Besides the camp and factories, there were a few other notable memorials. Chairs scattered in Polish ghettos symbolize the chairs older people would bring when waiting to get on the trains that would take them into the camps. Metal shoes on the edge of the Danube River in Budapest symbolize the Hungarian Jews killed in the Holocaust, specifically those taken by boat. A statue of Archangel Gabriel was put up by the government, but a fence was established in front as protest against the inaccuracy of what the statue stood for. The statue was meant to honor the victims of the Holocaust, but the way the statue was portrayed implies that Hungary had no control over the Nazi invasion, when in reality they welcomed the Nazis with open arms.
What memorial meant the most to you?
Probably the memorial in Budapest with the wires and like the protests.
The Birkenau.
The shoes on the Danube River.
I liked the shoes in Budapest.
The stones at Birkenau.
In the aftermath of World War II and the Holocaust, the Soviets took control of a large portion of Eastern and Central Europe. Post-liberation, Stalin began to enforce a communist ideology.
Parliamentary republic is the system of government used in all the countries we visited. This system is very similar to the government of the United States. However, in a parliamentary republic, the prime minister holds the majority of the power, rather than the president.
Modern-day lifestyle in Central Europe is an adventure within itself. Although Central Europe may seem like a historical time capsule in a tourist's eye, each city still has its own modern way of life. Since most of the countries are fairly small in size, many people travel between the countries every day. This is why the Schengen Zone exists. On June 14, 1985, close to the town of Schengen, Luxembourg, a treaty was signed by 5 of the 10 European Economic Community member states. 26 of the 50 states in Europe, 22 of which are members of the EU, participate in this agreement. The treaty allows people to travel from country to country without having to go through customs or show a passport. Yearly, there are about 1.3 billion crossings of the Schengen Zone borders. Transportation is also somewhat different in Europe. Inside of the cities, traffic is bustling 24/7. Public transportation is widely available. Walking is also an option in the big city for many people. Food is one more important factor in the modern lifestyle of Central Europe. Each country has its own flavors important to their cultures. For beverages, sparkling water is popular. Soft drink options were familiar but made with real sugar instead of artificial sweeteners. Central Europe's dishes feature meats, potatoes, and bread. Most of the countries have their own signature dishes that they're known for.
What was your favorite meal?
The chicken paprika.
The goulash that we had.
Gosh, soup.
The chicken with paprika sauce.
The horse.
Visiting Central Europe was a life-changing experience that we will never forget. Along the way, we discovered different people, cultures, and customs. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey.